Fancy Podcasts.
This is Chicagoland.
Hey, it's Katie, and we're back with Ivana, who we just heard in their interview with Damon, and Arjun, who's the producer on this episode and has been overseeing all the discussions you've heard in this episode. Arjun, what do you think?
You know, listening through Damon's interview, I first was mildly terrified. I don't think I could see myself being engaged at his age, but I had an admiration for that, especially when Ivana, you asked him about the whole question of risk. He seemed to have this whole idea of like, I'm willing to take this risk. This is someone with whom I feel ready and comfortable to be going through that. And again, I cannot imagine myself in that position at his age, but sort of something I admired.
Yeah, 100%. And when he talked about risk, he actually gave an answer I wasn't quite expecting, because when I think of being risk averse in the context of marriage, I think of people being worried about all these issues that are inherent in marriage, and so waiting longer and longer and longer in life to find a partner that they would be willing to overcome those risks with. So I think it's really admirable and quite beautiful, frankly, I guess, in being a softie,
Absolutely.
that he found someone he would want to experience all these potential issues with so early in life. Because I also was terrified. I mean, I am his age. We're peers, and I'm nowhere near that stage in life where I have someone in my life that I would be not dependent on, but someone who I would entrust with all these concerns of mine. So I think that was really sweet to hear him talk about his fiance that way.
Yeah, I definitely agree. What I thought was really interesting, and hearing things from my own peers from high school and stuff who actually are engaged and getting married, is like, this is kind of the traditional format that we've seen in like the early 20th century, meeting maybe in school, getting engaged. Like, it was very traditional, you know, even asking the father, the ring, which is what we don't really see today. And I think the conversation around cohabitation was really interesting, as not really being an immediate concern, and valuing maturity and a good like camaraderie between them is really interesting.
Next up, we're going to hear from our very own Emily Kellen, who will be interviewing a current Harris student who is married.
This is Emily Kellen. I'm here with Lindsay, who is a second-year Harris student. Hi, Lindsay.
Hi, Emily.
We wanted your perspective as someone who's been married for a few years now. So let's first fill in some background information. Can you tell me how you and your husband first met?
Oh, goodness. Okay, so we met actually at our first jobs right out of undergrad. Very charming. We started working at a large investment bank together. We were in the same analyst class, and we were just friends. We were both dating other people. We actually got to know each other's significant others, which is awkward now, but makes for a good story. And it was friendship for 5+ years before we started dating.
Wow. So once you were dating, how long did you guys date for?
We only dated for 10 months before we got engaged, but that's kind of the beauty of being friends with somebody before you start being romantically involved.
Yeah. So then how long were you engaged for after those 10 months?
We were engaged for about 18 months before we got married.
What was the reason for the difference in those timelines? Like, why do you think that the dating was sort of a shorter period and then you chose to have a longer engagement?
Dating was a shorter period because I feel like I already knew a lot about him when we started dating. So we had a lot of mutual friends. We worked together. I had met his family already. So it made for the sort of the dating timeline to be sped up. In terms of the engagement timeline, we got married overseas. So it was a lot of like logistical reasons. If we could have gotten married in 6 months, we probably would have. So yeah, that was a lot of like logistical stuff.
Got it. Did you guys live together before you got married?
We did. People love hearing this story, including my lovely family. We moved in together after 3 months of dating, which is a little aggressive for most people.
Yeah.
And it was extremely nerve-wracking. Part of it was out of convenience with lease expirations and wanting to move in together and save money, to be honest. And the other part was, again, we had this really like embedded friendship before we started dating. So it was like, let's move in together. Let's try this out. We're going to know really quickly whether or not this succeeds or fails. And it worked out very comfortably.
Were you guys already talking about marriage at that point?
When we initially moved in together, we weren't. I remember the first time that he told me that he loved me when we moved in together, like a week later, like, okay, your stuff's all over my apartment now. I had moved in with him. We have 2 of everything. we kind of started having some of those conversations and started talking about marriage actually pretty quickly after. He actually started having conversations with my family maybe a month later. It moved fast.
Yeah, sounds like it. In general, were there discussions that you had before deciding to get married about expectations for roles, having children or not having children, where you wanted to live, things like that?
Oh, for sure. All of the above. I think it was really important for me knowing that, like, going back to grad school, we were both career people. It was important for us to have conversations about, like, the fact that we were both very invested in our professional careers. So we definitely had that level setting. So there were no surprises down the road that, like, my career was going to be extremely important to me. And, like, I wanted to know he was supportive of that. And we definitely talked about, like, the desire to have children, although I feel like that changes frequently
for sure
now. Yeah, I mean, there was just a lot of level setting when we moved in together too. Like, moving in together is a huge decision, and starting to talk about marriage is an even bigger decision. And there was just a lot of getting to know each other, getting to know those quirks that maybe you don't see when you aren't in the same small space with somebody.
And then in terms of taking that next step, marriage is a pretty formal commitment. It has, like, legal and cultural parts of it.
For sure.
Why was it important to you guys to formalize your commitment in that way?
I think it was twofold. So for both of us as individuals, like, we were both raised in families where kind of this formality of marriage and having, like, a religious aspect to our marriage was very important. So we kind of level set in that regard that, like, having that formal commitment was important just because of those family structures we both came from. Another part of it too is just, like, I don't want to say, maybe societal is the right way to say it, is like, yes, we lived together. Yes, everyone knew we were together. Everyone knew we were going to be together forever. But there was kind of this, like, are you going to take his last name? Are you guys going to get married? Especially because we worked together. People, when you're boyfriend and girlfriend, there's kind of these informalities that are associated with that relationship, but kind of formalizing it through marriage was important to both of us. And you kind of see some of those pressures, like, play a role in that.
Yeah. I mean, so my next question is kind of about those cultural pressures. I think there's a lot of talk in our culture about the one and, like, when you know, that sort of thing. So, on this podcast, we kind of take, like, a Harris School lens to relationships. And I would say, like, a lot of economists would classify deciding to get married as a decision with a lot of risk involved.
For sure.
So I just kind of want to get your perspective. How did you know, or did you know right away? How did you know that he was the right person for you?
I tried to mitigate a lot of those risks. So for starters, we had worked together and I knew who he was. This is going to sound silly, but I knew that our firm had done, like, a background check. I knew he wasn't a criminal. I knew he had a good job. I knew what his goals were. I knew who he surrounded himself with. I had met his family. I knew what his, like, extracurricular hobbies were. So some of those things that can get kind of sticky when you're in a new relationship and you're learning those things about people, I had learned in advance, whether consciously or unconsciously, just by being around him. So I mitigated those risks very effectively, and people still laugh about it today. It's like, well, you didn't need to do any of that stuff because you knew a lot about him before you started dating.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for chatting with us. It's been really great getting to hear about your story.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Hey, it's Ivana, and I'm back in the studio with Katie and Arjun. What did you guys think about this interview?
I think with this interview, we can see a lot of actual commonalities between the two of them, even though they're a big difference in age. I think the first of, like, the obvious one is the time they've known each other before is quite long. Both went through work, went through school, but the quickness in when they got together and got engaged is very short, and I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, I think Lindsay basically explicitly said, that's sort of the benefit of being friends with someone for 5 years is where if you're dating someone fresh from day one, there is a whole, like, getting to know each other, but at least the, let's say, friendship segment of the relationship is more or less covered, and now we have to figure out the rest of what's going to happen. And it also seems similar sort of with how Damon described it, having known his fiance Kem for a while through school before they started actually dating.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you guys brought up the commonalities because I think there's a really important difference between the two couples. With Damon and chemistry, I feel like Damon was really willing to take the plunge and in that sense accept those risks by kind of going all in with this one person. And I think with Lindsay, because she's older and she's already had an established career and, you know, she's already kind of had built a life outside of that relationship, she kind of approached the decision to get married in a more practical way, in the sense that she was thinking, okay, is this someone who conforms to a lot of my values? And because they've already known each other, she already knew a lot about him, but she was just thinking about how well he would complement her in their relationship as they face these risks together for the rest of their lives. So I think that difference is pretty subtle, but it's important because, you know, it might be a factor of age, it might be a factor of personality, but different people approach risk in different ways. And that's really something we've heard in those interviews, because when I ask these questions about risk to Damon, when Emily asked Lindsay, I think they just approach these questions in very different ways.
Yeah, and I think the ideas of risk is really interesting, and I think they at least try to mitigate it in different ways. But I think they kind of, in a different way, have like this aspects of like the traditional marriage institution aspects. With Damon, young couple, never has cohabitated before. And then we have a cohabiting couple, but who does have traditional aspects. Like Lindsay mentioned, societal aspects of religion and family are really important to her, so he's going to her family to ask for her hand.
Yeah, and I can't even tell if this is like a commonality or a difference really, because they're both thinking about the risk aspect of it, but maybe in different ways. So not sure exactly what to make of that, but Lindsay's got this sort of, I mean, just having lived longer, she has more of a life built up that she cares a lot about. And she's making sure that a lot of like boxes are ticked for what she was looking for at that point in her life. Whereas Damon's approach seemed to be a little bit more ready to like take the plunge. And again, that's not to sound any way about it, but that is sort of a different approach. And it sounds like that's what he wanted out of it and what's right for him.
Yeah, absolutely. And just thinking about all the different ways people approach and think about the commitments inherent in marriage. One of our earlier survey respondents actually said something that I think really encapsulates the complexity of the conversations we've been having. And here's what they said. It's strange that so many people seek something so demanding, so challenging, so high risk, and ultimately so unnecessary. I think that's also what makes it beautiful, that we are willing to do all of that for just one other person. This was Naked Love from UC3P. We're your hosts,
Katie James
and Ivana Shevel.
Listeners, don't forget to subscribe to Public Policy Podcasts. Our latest favorite is the new UC3P main page miniseries, Bite Size Policy, where they demystify current issues and talk about what you can do about them.
Their first episode is on referenda in Illinois criminal justice, government structure, and tax policy.
See you next time!
And that's a wrap on another episode of UC3P. The Naked Love team consists of interviewers Emily Kellen, Ivana Shevel, and Katie James, editor Amy Liu, and engineer and producer Arjun Mota. Our assistant production managers are Arjun Mota, Olu Ogidan, Saumya Karun, and Suo Wu. Our communications director is Thomas Krasnation. Our finance director is Donovan Harvey. Our publisher is Haz Yano. Our intro music is Knockout 2 by The Tubi, and our outro music is Yes Yes Y'all by Matt Large. Our cover art was designed by Shirin Raban. If you want to hear more podcasts, check out our website, uc3p.org. And if you want to contact us, our email is theuc3p@gmail.com. My name is David Raban, and stay tuned. We'll be back next week talking about poverty and progressive income taxes with the president of the Shriver Center, John Bowman.
Following the news?
Yeah, it's been good. I'm going to try and be less snarky this time.
Okay. Have you heard what's going on? Like, or do you know what's going on? Like, it's...
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know what's going down.
Yeah, there's so much going on.
Yeah. When
Yeah.
the funk hits the fan, you got to understand what's going down. What's going down, down, down. No?
No, I don't know that song.
Oh, man.
Who's that by?
I don't know. Someone from the 80s.
80s. Okay, that's like how long ago? How many centuries ago is that? 80s.
1680s.
1680s.
Yeah.
No, that sounds
Yeah.
about right.
Yeah.
Sounds about right.
A lot of